Hi there, gang. It's the year 2020. Yeah, it's 2020. Hooray. It started with the promise of war, and it's the primer for the cosmic cook-off that is this planet's ultimate future. So let's look back at the last decade. I don't normally like to do retrospective things outside of the year. I try and, do a retrospective of the decade within it. Although people do like to point out smugly that 2021 is the start of the decade because zero, don't listen to them. This is the start of the new decade, but there's not a lot to look forward to. So we're going to look back a little bit more, just cling on to the past, and we will deal with the upcoming decade. What the fuck is that? Oh. There's a camera plastic mount with the glasses on, and against the carpet it looked like a poo. But it wasn't. What was the most influential game of the decade known as the 2010s? Or the tens? Or the taunties? Or the tensies? Or the teensies? Craig, are these fucking real? What? Anyway, that 2010 decade is all wrapped up, and if we get that World War III everyone's talking about, we might not have much of a 2020s, so let's look back on the decade that was and enjoy a little bit more retrospective. Let's just keep looking back. Keep looking back. The past can't hurt you, it's already happened. Only the future will kill you. There's been a lot of talk about the best games of the decade, the worst games of the decade, and the most influential games. We've done plenty of good and bad talk here, so today I want to look at those games that have had the most influence, that informed future game design, inspired the games developed in their wake, or otherwise had some major impact on the medium. But influence is a broad church. It doesn't necessarily have to mean the most popular game. It doesn't even need to be a good game at all to have been the most influential. Is the most influential game simply the best game, the most popular game, the one that inspired many copies, the one that gained the most pop culture traction, or is it the worst game? The one that inspired the most mockery, the one that served as a warning to other developers. I've seen it argued that The Witcher 3, for example, is one of the most influential games of the decade, but is that really true? The Witcher 3 is one of the past decade's most critically acclaimed games, that much is true. It's a game that has been played by millions with an active player base still going strong today, even breaking concurrent player records recently, following the Witcher series on Netflix. But was The Witcher 3 influential across the game industry? When we look around at the state of the industry since The Witcher 3's 2015 release, it doesn't look like much of its quality has been aped by the mainstream market. Where The Witcher 3 uses an open world to tell not one but dozens of fully written single-player story-driven quests, its peers in the AAA space have used open worlds to release barely finished, threadbare, live service games with a strong emphasis on social interactions among players. Where The Witcher 3 boasted full DLC expansions like Blood and Wine, most comparable games still rely on microtransactions which are easier to implement and stand to make more money potentially. Depending on how many players they can target and hoodwink. The Witcher 3 is a great game and rightly beloved by its large audience, but one of the reasons it stands out most today is that it didn't see too many pretenders to its throne. In the latter half of the 2010s, most game publishers in the mainstream area were too busy hopping aboard the live service gravy train. In fact, it could be argued that The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim was far more influential than The Witcher 3. Hear me out. While games in a post-Witcher 3 world moved away more and more from Witcher-like experiences, Skyrim released right at the start of the 2010s when the live service gravy train was but a mere push trolley, and it was followed by games trying to chomp its flavour. With good cause too. Despite what Bethesda has become these days, Skyrim was a true game changer way back when it released in 2011. A game of that size, scale and ambition at the time turned quite a few heads. We take it for granted now, but Skyrim at the time was remarkable for its depth and scale and sheer volume of stuff to do, and games that followed took quite a few cues from Bethesda's work. Dragon's Dogma, for instance, was an explicit attempt by Capcom to design a Skyrim-like game. Dragon Age Inquisition married BioWare's typical approach to RPG design with Bethesda's large-scale world-building. The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild owes many of its shifts away from a traditional Zelda experience to the groundwork Skyrim laid down. Almost a decade on, and it can be hard to realise exactly what an impact Skyrim, long since overexposed thanks to endless re-releases, made on the RPG genre and game design as a whole. To say nothing of the effect it had on media at the time. In fact, it became referenced to a ridiculous degree, as famously emphasised by Adam Kovic of Machinima when he notoriously said Far Cry 3 was like Skyrim with guns. As mocked as that statement became, it provides a snapshot of an era when Skyrim was the thing other games got measured against. But when it comes to inspiring copycats and increasingly strained comparisons, Dark Souls may have Skyrim beat. Now, Dark Souls was not the first game of what would become known as the Soulsborne series, following as it did 2009's Demon's Souls, which was a bloody great game by the way. But while Demon's Souls was both an excellent game and a cult hit, it wasn't until Dark Souls that From Software's cyclical experience and challenging methodical gameplay went mainstream. Now, Dark Souls is an incredible video game and remains among my most played titles today. It also did what Doom did back in the 90s and inspired a wave of follow-ups from other studios trying to get in on that hot new action. The Souls-like has become a full subgenre, and while the name may change one day the way Doom Clone did, although maybe not, we still have Metroidvanias and roguelikes, the hallmarks are clearly defined. Games that emphasise careful combat with a need to balance stamina limits between offense and defense, checkpoints that respawn defeated enemies in exchange for healing the player, leaving something behind upon death that can be lost unless retrieved, and a general sense of tough but fair challenge. These are all part of a typical Souls-like, which range from worthy successors to weak pretenders. Lords of the Fallen, the Surge series, Neo, Code Vein, Salt and Sanctuary, Blasphemous, Ashen, Dead Cells, Hollow Knight, they're all either full-on Souls-alike or owe a significant portion of their design to From Software. The series has inspired endless memes as well, and reached a point where things like Praise the Sun and You Died are known even by people who don't play the game. And as for drawing comparisons, well, it's reached a point where the Dark Souls of, insert genre here, has become a thoroughly beaten horse. It has in fact become the Dark Souls of comparisons. Forget it. Of course, it's not just the AAA space that can boast influential games. One of the standouts of the decade was, of course, Undertale. Toby Fox's inventively charming RPG played not just with its genre, but with video games as a medium, and had a lot to say about the people who play them. In the indie space, Undertale did inspire a few games to follow in its wake, such as the incredible Pony Island. And the sheer dedication of its fan base, the endless jokes and memes and pop culture insinuation, that can all make a case for its influential nature. Undertale certainly had enough clout to get Sans into Super Smash Bros., kinda, while AEW star Kenny Omega strolled onto TNT's Wednesday Night Dynamite fully decked out in cosplay gear using Megalovania as his entrance theme. And Kenny, if you're watching, can I be on your television program? Ha ha ha, only joking. I know you're not watching this. Now, influence is not automatically positive, as we established at the beginning. Grima Wormtongue influenced Theoden King, Jaggy influenced Shin, and semi-poisonous hallucinogens influenced the Cats movie. The game industry is full of bullshit, and that bullshit doesn't come from just anywhere. So-called AAA game publishers have demonstrated time and time again that if one shitty idea gains traction, they'll copy it over and over and over. Many unpopular or annoying video game practices started with a single game. For example, 2011's LA Noire is commonly noted to be the first game boasting a season pass, featuring as it did a Rockstar Pass, promising new playable missions, as well as a pair of outfits and a challenge mode. Around the same time, 2011's Mortal Kombat dabbled with the concept, because of course it did. Publisher Warner Brothers is a bag of dicks. From there, the concept of the season pass has taken off to ludicrous degrees, with most mainstream games offering some way for the audience to pay for content that literally doesn't exist yet. Once publishers realised they could get you to pre-order DLC and most people wouldn't question it, they realised they could get away with anything. Now even full-priced games have much of the content planned for long after purchase, and as we head into a new decade, the idea that what you buy at launch is just a taste that can be fleshed out with additional purchases has become a widespread, sadly normalised thing. Two games from Electronic Arts can be credited as testing the waters and getting away with one of my biggest and most infamous bugbears: good old microtransactions in premium priced games. Dubbed fee to pay by myself, $60 titles with ongoing psychologically manipulative micropayments were dabbled with by Mass Effect 3 in 2012 and Dead Space 3 in 2013, EA experimenting in the first game and solidifying in the second. Microsoft would then normalise the concept for a new generation, with Xbox One launch titles like Rise, Son of Rome and Crimson Dragon glomming onto microtransactions immediately to set the tone going forward. This toxic stew of greed-fueled games from EA and Microsoft took the popular model of free-to-play games and exploited it for full-priced, big-budget titles. And once they got away with it, their filth spread across the entire industry. Now microtransactions are fucking everywhere, and they're here to stay. Thanks, EA. Thanks, Microsoft. You bunch of sperm. Then there are loot boxes. Oh yes. Like microtransactions, they started on mobile and are fucking everywhere now, but one game absolutely made them popular. That game is, of course, Overwatch. As I've said before, Overwatch is to loot boxes what Resident Evil is to survival horror. It didn't originate, but it was the perpetuator. Team Fortress 2 introduced the loot box concept to mainstream games way back in 2010, and in the time between then and Overwatch's 2016 release, roughly 10 games implemented loot boxes in some capacity. After Overwatch's release, where loot boxes proved successful and people actually defended them at the time, over 22 games featured loot boxes in just over a year. Those who still go to bat for Blizzard like to claim FIFA was far more influential in terms of introducing gambling to games, even coining the term Wilson box to describe loot boxes, so named after EA's robotic CEO, Android Wilson, a term contrived to create an intrinsic link between loot boxes and Electronic Arts instead of Activision Blizzard. But all signs point to Overwatch as the game that truly inspired publishers to push that poison onto the general public. But if Overwatch made them normal and a cool thing to do in the game industry, it can be argued that Star Wars Battlefront 2, a grossly erroneous overstep from EA, had a grand part to play in damaging their credibility. After using loot boxes to bring pay-to-win mechanics to Star Wars, the fan backlash was massive, to the point where legislators got involved, and more serious talks were had about the socio-economic impact of video game monetization. EA chose to be amazingly avaricious even by its own standards, and absolutely chose the wrong game to do it with. A Star Wars game. A game even non-gaming reporters at mainstream outlets could understand because Star Wars. So of course they fucking reported on it, and now we have gambling commissions across the world looking at loot boxes and saying, you know what, that looks an awful lot like gambling. While loot boxes are still popular, especially in the mobile market's underbelly, they became untenable for all but the most shameless of companies. Between them, Overwatch and Star Wars Battlefront 2 had major influence on the decade's most controversial money-making tactic. And then there's Fortnite. You see, while we can sit here and talk about the game's most familiar and popular titles among long-term game players, we cannot understate the sheer mass appeal of Epic Games' Fortnite, which is so mainstream it makes what I call a mainstream game look positively niche. I mean, they unveiled content for Rise of the Skywalker in Fortnite, content that should have, you know, been in Rise of the Skywalker, but instead was sectioned off for a shameless publicity stunt. What a fucking mess of a film. What a fucking mess. And I don't need your hot takes, by the way, about how it's actually good. I realise we're in the backlash to the backlash phase, the backlash now to Rise of the Skywalker reactions, but it's a bad film. Anyway, Fortnite has turned dance moves into real-life fads, especially the ones it stole. Practically fucking everybody knows what Fortnite is. Millions have played it, from those deeply into video games to the lightest casual player, and it makes more than enough money per day to make the average person violently sick. As well as that, it popularized the Battle Pass, which looks set to be the hot new thing, and may lead to in-game premium subscriptions, as seen with Fallout 76's Fallout First debacle. $100 a year subscription for Fallout 76? Fucking what? Licky what? Fortnite's crossed over with the Avengers, Batman, Stranger Things, the fucking NFL. It will have crossed over with fucking Some Mothers Do Have 'Em by the time this sentence is finished. And the Battle Royale genre absolutely exploded thanks to it. PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds may have had the first taste of mass appeal in the genre, and mods in open-world games like DayZ and Rust may have originated it. But Fortnite blew everything out of the water and inspired dozens upon dozens of knockoffs, as well as Battle Royale modes in series like Call of Duty and Fallout. But if you roll your hipster eyes at Fortnite being called the most influential game of the 2010s, you'll pull them out your fucking head when I say with some confidence what the most influential game actually was. And that game is Clash of Clans. When we get down to the wire, whether we talk about critically acclaimed games like The Witcher 3, inspirational genre creators like Dark Souls, or mass market smashes like Fortnite, there's no getting away from the fact that a freemium strategy game on mobile was more than likely the most influential thing over the course of this decade following its 2012 release. I know for a bloody fact it's hugely influential because, as I've noted in past videos, Clash of Clans has consistently been one of 3 games that industry executives reference. In fact, to some executives, the ones that come from other industries outside of games, Clash of Clans is one of only 3 games that they even acknowledge exists, alongside Call of Duty and Candy Crush. These 3 games are the unholy trinity of greed-fueled publishers, a trinity I've handily abbreviated to CODCOC. In its own market, Clash of Clans inspired hundreds of mobile strategy games that aped not just its gameplay, but its art style. Look at all these icons! Outside of that market, the sheer wealth its microtransactions accumulated did not go unseen by AAA publishers. Hungry for some of that sweet do-re-mi, one of the reasons given by Visceral Games for Dead Space 3's fee-to-pay bullshit was the popularity of freemium models on mobile, and Clash of Clans has been the gold standard for most of the decade. In 2015, the game was raking in $1.5 million a day. By 2018, it had generated more revenue than any other mobile app ever. Its freemium model was copied by big budget publishers who saw no reason to actually make their games free. Its success has spawned legions of knockoffs. Like Fortnite, almost everyone knows what it is. Maybe Fortnite would have proven more influential if it had released earlier in the 2010s, but over the course of the past 10 years, Clash of Clans has exerted more influence over the people pulling the levers of the game industry, and that's the sad fact. No matter what brilliant games you like, no matter their quality, their cultural traction, their fandom, or their respect, none of them were as important in shaping this generation as Clash of fucking Clans. So enjoy thinking about that. Oh yeah, Minecraft come out this decade and all. It was pretty popular. Eagle-eyed viewers may have spotted that there wasn't really any mention of Nintendo, and no, it's not because I'm biased. It's a similar reason to The Witcher 3, really, but more so because Nintendo tends to exist in its own little bubble doing its own little thing, and I feel that's been consistent of them for the past 2 decades, really. They get on with their own thing. I mean, last generation, they inspired a lot of motion control stuff, but it didn't really take off. So even then, they influenced a fad, but maybe not the whole decade. But that was the decade before the one we're even looking at, so don't even get me off topic, you cheeky goose. I don't know what I meant by that. But all things considered, one thing I can say in Nintendo's favour, and you can take this to the bank, is the Switch was easily my favourite system this past decade. Easy. Maybe one of my favourite systems ever, possibly my favourite one. We would, I'd have to test it in a lab to fully commit to it, but yeah, of the decades, easy, bang up job. Love the Switch. And play Resident Evil 4 on it. What other system could do that? Thank God for me.
Everybody's thinking about me.